Once again, just a reminder, you can continue your own leadership journey by enrolling in the Family Office Leaders cohort. Visit the Equalify booth and participate in the lucky draw. And also do not forget to post on your social media, LinkedIn, Twitter, and use the hashtag. Beyond wealth management and investment returns, many family offices are increasingly focusing on making a meaningful difference in society through strategic philanthropy and social impact initiatives. This fireside chat will explore how family offices can thoughtfully and effectively build a legacy that extends far beyond financial assets. We are honored to have Ms. Leena Dandekar, founder and principal of Raintree Family Office and Raintree Foundation. Ms. Dandekar brings a wealth of experience in impact investing and philanthropic strategies. Guiding this important conversation as our session chair is Mr. Neil Borate, Editor, Personal Finance, Mint. Please welcome them on stage. Can we have a big round of applause for the lady and the gentleman?
Hello everyone. So after several discussions about money and how it's managed, for the first time today, we're going to talk about something other than money. I know that many folks here are keen to figure out the monetary parts of family offices and how they invest. In fact, the first set of questions that I sent to Leena were about what are the check sizes, how does she invest, what kind of valuations work, and then I realized that her vision is much broader than just money and just profits, because that's one side of life, that's important. But real legacy comes from doing something for other people that stands the test of time. And that's the philosophy that she set out with. So without further ado, Leena, can you take us through the origin of your family office and why did this particular problem interest you? Climate change, impact investing.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I wish there were more ladies in the room. Challenging wisdom on wealth and money. Origins of our family office as well come from a liquidity event in our family business. And there was one point over I would say a decade that we rationalized management and ownership, and through several rounds of divestment in various kinds of companies, we came to a point where we had no family business and we had more money than we needed. At that point, my children were late teens, early 20s, I would say. And it became very important for us to think about what our day jobs would be and what does this wealth mean? What does the ability to pay your bills for the rest of your life, not to worry about a roof over your head, to be able to put your priorities in place without pressures, whether it be your family, whether it be your health, whether it be just the choice to be a better person every time you're faced with a choice. I think a lot of pressures that we face in modern lives, in our urban realities, is about wealth, about things we own, about our houses, which car we drive, keeping up with everybody else. But honestly, beyond a point, a car is a car, a earring is a earring, a sari, I won't say a sari is a sari, I have a couple of hundred of them, but it's because I'm promoting Indian handicrafts, but you really have to think hard. I have been a single parent for a very long time. It became a singular responsibility to cut away from the legacy, which was very, very strong, very wholesome, very holistic, and try and find meaning in that money. I mean, leave alone my young, impressionable children in their early 20s who had to make entire lives, build their lives ahead of them. I myself was feeling a sense of loss and a lack of grounding to a purpose. And then I began to think, what does this wealth give us? What does it give me? And I realized I can lead exactly the kind of life. I can choose what kind of day I want to lead. And who has that choice, right? I mean, how lucky can you get? Your only perceived reality of your life is how you spend the day and how you slept in the night, thinking back on what your day was and how good you feel about it. That is your only reality, and the fact that I can choose, my children can choose to have wonderful days, full of meaning, full of purpose, not having to cut shortcuts or do things which need battling with our consciences. The fact that we can have a conscience, all of these are beautiful gifts that our forefathers left us in the kind of wealth we got from them. And that's what I wanted to take forward, honestly. And I said, what gives purpose to this wealth, which in my view had no purpose whatsoever? And I began to think about what is the power of wealth, what is the power of wealth owners, what is the networks we have access to. Coming from my own background in the family business, do I have any business acumen? Do I have any networks? Can I build teams? Do I know how to manage a balance sheet well? Do I know how to make projections? Can I teach a team to do that? And I realize I have a bunch of things, financial and non-financial assets that we had. I had primarily, my children would have had it through me, and decided I would like to devote all of these combined resources to drive a positive change. And so at that point of time in year zero, in 2017 actually, we took a very big, bold bet saying our money will do no harm, which means that we will not, no matter how attractive the returns, put it in asset classes which we see as harming planet or people. So in a big move, departing from every conventional advice that we got from so many advisors we met at that point, we put a third of our entire net worth, which was then at that point an investable corpus, into ESG and impact assets. It's year 8 since then. It is fully deployed. We are outperforming by the market in leaps and bounds. I think there's just no comparison with the markets. We've been very sensible. We developed our own metrics. At that point, we said we have a negative checklist, which means we have an ESG checklist on sectors we will absolutely not touch, no matter what the return. That is our do no harm policy. And then we said, is it good enough to do no harm? Does what we have as assets, as resources at our disposal, can we drive something positive? Do we stay at a neutral, or can we drive an impact? And we said, no, we can drive an impact, and therefore we went to impact investing. So that's the impact investing piece to a third of our portfolio in the current point of time. Coming to why the climate crisis, again, it comes from my discussions at home at that point. We are a small family of 3 people, and my son had finished undergrad. And as with family discussions, what do you do next? What are you planning to do next? And he looked at me and he said, he was 21, and he said, what are you asking? He said, I've been observing climate patterns, weather patterns since I was maybe 13, 14, since I started understanding weather, and I'm 21, and in the last 7, 8 years, I see no pattern. Do you realize that I'm going to live to be 100, at least, which is true? Most of my parents are living to 90, 92, 95 currently, and this is their grandchild you're talking about, so 100 is a given. And he said, 80 more years, and I've spent only 20 here, and 1/3 out of those 20, since jab se hosh sambhala hai, more or less, I don't see any pattern. Do you understand the kind of anxiety my generation feels? Do you understand that I cannot plan ahead for a career or an education or where I will live? What kind of stability? What have you done? He asked me that. Your generation is responsible. And it is true, and I began to think, saying I was maybe 50 at that point, and I said, everybody between 40, 45 to 55, 60, we are the people who are making the world go round at this point of time. I am smack in the middle of that age group, and so are most of you. And what are we doing for our children? And those who have grandchildren, you're looking at 100, 120, 150 years ahead. What are we doing about that crisis, which every loved one of ours in the next generation is going to feel? And then we started thinking about impact being equal to climate change and climate action. And my daughter echoed those sentiments because she's just 3 years older, and we said, okay, if we want to put meaning to our money, then this is a good place to start, because the portfolio we were creating was not for me. I knew I was not planting a tree under whose shade I would sit. It was a tree planted for, somebody else. My children, somebody else's children, all your children and grandchildren. And so I said, okay, let's look on what they want, not look at what we want, what I want. My sensibilities are obviously jaded, not relevant anymore. And so we talked about climate change. Now, climate change, Neil, is a buzzword. It means everything. It can mean nothing. It can mean horrible kinds of greenwashing as well. We are well aware of the pitfalls of being a passionate impact investor. I met a young man outside who is a big detractor to impact investing. I don't know if he's here. Maybe he'll put his hand up, saying, I want to have a good debate with you on why impact. I don't believe in it. It's true. We also felt the same reservations about the sector as it stood 8 years ago. And therefore, we decided to also walk our own path. What we work on is responsible consumption as our innermost, tightest circle, coming to individual choices. We talk about circularity, which is about natural resources and how many times you use it, how wisely you use the gifts of this earth. And then we talk about sustainability, which includes not just sustainability from an environmental perspective, but looks at sustainability of the solutions so that they last. These three are our main kind of pillars under the larger climate action piece. So that's what the family office does now.
Yeah, it's nicely put, to plant a tree under whose shade you would not yourself sit, but future generations would. So how did you go about selecting your first set of investments? Because this itself is a very wide space. And a decision that you took early on was not to have control over those companies. So why that?
Okay, several reasons, starting from, I think, the personal. Like I said, I have been a single parent. One of my children was unwell at that point. I had aged in-laws, both with progressive conditions. So it meant that I was the responsible adult in the house for medical issues and emergencies. Now, if you're starting a new business or taking controlling interest in a business, there is a lot you want to do. It involved my time, my attention, my ability to put in a team which could then, put their fingers in the pie and live those experiences with the company we were investing in. Sometimes when you invest from the outside, you don't know the whole reality, and you go in and a whole can of worms opens. All that is not something I could take personally at that point of time. And so we said we will not do those. Now, if I had to do it, thankfully, medical issues and others are resolved, but now I'm too old, so I still won't do it. So priorities have changed. I think the energy levels of 8-10 years ago, I feel my priorities are changing. And so that's all acceptable. Having said that, my daughter has started a business. She does mental health consulting it's called Elephant in the Room Consulting for mental health at the workplace. And she does consulting with companies, does programs with companies for their employees, management, and for policies, so that they can be more, accommodating for mental health. And that is an operational business. It's brand new. First sales are coming up. And so that's a decision she took, because that's her decision to how to spend her time and her days going ahead, right? So each of us will take those decisions in the next decade or two, but at that point of time, we said no. The other reason was because a third of our entire net worth was in impact and ESG. It meant that, again, looking at my personal bandwidth and our ability in year 0 to manage a larger portfolio, we said not more than 7 or 8 companies, which made our ticket sizes larger. You divide a third of our wealth by 8, it becomes a big ticket size. And it also meant that a bigger ticket size with less than 10% meant the big companies which were investing in were much larger. Obviously, it's simple math. It also meant that they already had stability in terms of management bandwidth, prior investors, a bunch of those. So we were not in the startup space at all. So when I saw your first questionnaire, I said, the title of the session and his questions don't match. And I told UT, my colleague, I said, did he read what he's supposed to, talk about? But it is very differentiated. Certain decisions logically leading to other decisions. I am very glad to say we've not had to revisit any of those at any point of time in the last 8-9 years that we've been living this impact philosophy, not only at a larger level, but actually executing it with all the benchmarks and the methodology that we've put in. Back to you.
Right. But can you elaborate on the companies that you did choose and what made them make the cut?
Okay, well, we almost never do very early stage. We are looking at mature managements, we are looking at prior investors. We are also, along with impact investors, we are value investors. So we are looking at the intrinsic value of the company, the strength of the product, the strength of the team, the how can I say, the quality, integrity of the founder, the entrepreneur, the ability to get market share, bunch of these business diligence metrics. We are not necessarily looking to exit in a 2-year, 3-year, 5-year cycle. If the company is doing very, very well, we will maybe invest, we will reinvest. We've done that, double down as well. Being value investors means we are buying into the value of the business. So one valuation, which at times is fully made up, in many ways, being convincingly sold to another person who comes and buys you out, that's not what we are looking at. That's a trading kind of game, right? That's what we do in the markets. We have one price today, we wait for some days, we get another price tomorrow, we wait for the right time, we sell it. That's not what we are in it for. I see the value of small and medium businesses in India. My family has been part of that journey. I think the biggest wealth is in our entrepreneurship, in our homegrown engineering, in our Jugaad solutions, our ability to build solutions from the ground up. It's also now extending to our ability to conquer global markets in very niche ways. Touching upon impact in similar kind of businesses, impact is an idealistic, perfect a solution of economies and industry which looks after planet and people is a pipe dream, right? It's not going to happen overnight. There are bridging solutions, incremental solutions. You have to go through 1,000 steps before you come to that place closer to ideal. Now, if you don't climb step 2, you're not going to get to step 3, and you don't climb 3, you're not going to go to 4. And so our job is to encourage that innovation the entire time, continue investing in professionals, in managements, in technology, science, who can keep doing that, because that is the road ahead. You don't go from Mumbai to Delhi without bypassing many, many towns on the way and doing 1 kilometer at a time. That's just is plain reality. So we cannot get into idealistic solutions of pure impact and ideal impact. What we have to do as a family, believing in the innate entrepreneurial mind and the Indian spirit, is to encourage constant movement towards impact, and that's the space we've chosen to be. So we don't claim very grand impact metrics. We know what we are doing. We are happy with it.
All right. So you have a second round of investments that you're now doing, which is more in the public market space.
Correct.
Could you elaborate on that?
Yes. So we got to a point where a third of our wealth was in unlisted private equity. Not a good place to be, as most managers will tell you. Little bit risky. So we said, okay, karna to impact hai. So we are doing 2 things actually to further the impact work that our family does today. From a third, in the next iteration of our portfolio, we all know we work on a 8-year-old cycle of investments where money essentially will double. We are over with one phase of that, as the first phase, we took care of everything that we had to do. All the structures are ready, trusts are ready, you know, a bunch of those hygiene matters that families and family offices do, all that done. Now, the next phase honestly has no needs on it, and the next doubling is something I began to ask my children. I said, are we happy with our impact journey? And they said, very much so. And what would we like to do with the doubling which will come in the next 9 years? And they say, do more impact. So we have to now find ways to do it. And we cannot possibly go to 50 or 60% portfolio in unlisted equities or any other, illiquid assets. So we said, my team, we have a small 3-member team in our family office, and they said, why are we not looking at listed impact? You know, there are a lot of companies who do good impact, they're just not calling themselves that. I said, do you know how many companies you'll have to go through to find those? And to convince ourselves, but also our investment committee, that it not only stands true on impact, but it also stands true on its measurement as a good investment. So you're looking at 3 parameters. One, impact parameters, then you're looking at as us being value investors. So we made it doubly hard for ourselves. We said we need value investment options, but we also said we definitely like making money, because more money means more good, you know, in the future. And those 3 are hard to come by. I'm happy to say my team has found 3 businesses on the listed space, which are yet to go to the IC though, which is next week. And we are going to have a hard battle to convince our IC not only on the impact, but also on the promise of gains. So that's in the Indian markets, and we will continue that. I've allocated some seed funding over the next 5 years to be able to build a portfolio of 10 to 15 companies, which would then qualify on the impact bucket, but also for value investing and gains. Looking further as well, we are looking at the OPI routes and bunch of these things which are, you know, stuck for everybody, including us, but that's a good way also to drive impact, because the impact market in some markets is very active. I can get listed opportunities far wider than what I will get in India for the next 8 or 10 years for sure. So that is something that we are working on the structuring for, to be able to put up a family office with the primary purpose of doing exclusively impact investing globally. Another reason for doing that is that there are many sectors which are upcoming, which you don't get in India. And that's something we would, I would say, more climate-focused investing. If you had to look at listed and climate-focused as 2 filters to that next doubling, then that's difficult to do in India on a listed platform. So we do have to widen, where we invest and how we invest, and that's something that we are looking at right now.
Now, one question that comes to mind is, why not directly do philanthropy?
Yes.
Why do impact investing instead? Or I think one thing that you do is use the gains of impact investing to do philanthropy. So if you could elaborate on that.
Not exactly the way you said it, but I'm glad you asked about philanthropy, because we do practice impact on all ends of the impact spectrum. So while impact investing is one extreme end where you're expecting to make high gains, we also look at philanthropy. We do have, under the Raintree Group, Raintree Foundation, which is an active grassroots philanthropic organization also working on the climate problem. What we do in our philanthropy in Raintree Foundation is that we look at a very community focused resilience project. So these are, we call it climate resilience for vulnerable communities. And those vulnerabilities of the community come from the landscapes that they live in. So it's a very unique, differentiated project from many other philanthropies where we do a landscape-based model. So we're looking at one piece of earth at a time, talking about our planetary focus, one piece of earth at a time, usually defined by natural boundaries. So our first project is a micro watershed, which happens to have 9 villages. So when we work comprehensively on the water cycle of a particular landscape, We are also ensuring water not only for the community but also for biodiversity. And we all know unless the bees and the birds and biodiversity is there, we can neither have rainfall because there's no catchment area, but nor can we have the pollination that we need. So every agrarian community in India, and there's 60-70% of us are agrarian, is dependent very, very closely on their natural environments. And unless we can establish stability and health of natural environments, you're not going to have resilience and stability of well-being of communities, especially in agrarian India. So we work on very long projects. Our projects are designed to be 15 years long with a 5-year support period because nature takes that much time to heal, and communities, they take that much time to undergo the complete radical mind shift away from extractive chemical-based farming to more regenerative methods. So what the community needs to learn is to take only as much as can renew next year, and what we need to do is stabilize the environment so that what the community needs, which is the ecosystem services, which is the biodiversity, the water, the ability, groundwater, bunch of these things that the ecosystem gives us as a support is stable and secure. So while you ask about our philanthropy, our ultimate goal is to bring stability to the natural environments of any landscape. Our method is 100% working with the community. So we are very, very community based. It takes us very long because it takes that long to change mindsets at a community level. We are on project 2 in Ratnagiri on a very large river basin. It has about 400 rivers. It's a large river basin starting from the Western Ghats, which is a global biodiversity hotspot, and then going up to the ocean. So we are covering estuaries, mangroves, Western Ghats, and all the way from 0 to a kilometer in altitude. A bunch of variations in community sizes, community occupations, caste, class, occupations, all of that, depending on the landscape. We don't realize till we step out of the city how much the landscape affects the communities and their customs. And that's something that you need to know and see. So that is our addressing our climate crisis to the people who really need addressing it, which is our vulnerable communities who face loss of livelihoods and loss of the cultural glue that they have, which wears off with the pressures that they feel from the loss of our livelihoods. That's where we work. Coming to addressing how do we finance this, impact investing is a treatment, is applying impact to our wealth. So we apply the investment model to the wealth that we have, which we inherited from our forefathers. Philanthropy is more about our incomes, about our annual incomes. So our portfolios have been designed to be able to commit large amounts of money. We have about $1 million, which is promised every single year to the philanthropy that we do, plus a little more, which I'd rather not talk about, to mental health enterprises that we support. That $1 million will come in a good year, in a bad year, no matter what happens to the markets, whether we have good income, if we have to dip into our capital, we'll do it. It's a promise from the family to the work that we do, to the cause that we serve. And so our portfolios, again, the same way as we talk about the long-term focus of our family for philanthropy or for impact investing, our portfolios also have that long-term focus. If you have, assuming you're making 10% every year on an average, on our portfolio, to earn $1 million every year, you need that much more money dedicated as capital only to earn for philanthropy. And God forbid, one year you go down to 6% or 8%, the market fell, then you have to have more than that much money to make up for it. And that's the kind of commitment that the family has made. We are very serious about it. And me making that commitment, no big wonder, but I think when my children took that up in their early 20s, even today, 8 years down the line, it probably is among my prouder moments as a mother that my children chose to take on this commitment. They stayed true to it. They have not felt the need to budge, and they actually tell me, maybe we should up our philanthropic funding. And that coming to the previous speakers we heard, it's the value systems of the family, right? And this is the legacy you want to carry on. Legacy is not about having the same business or the same methods or touching your elders' feet every day, if that is what your legacy. Its legacy is about having the freedom to be the best person you could be, not just for yourself, for everything and everybody around you. And I think that's what our parents and our forefathers taught us, and that's what we are trying to teach our children, but I'm glad to say these two have learnt it. So far, so good. So yeah, Neil, I think impact needs to be driven across all angles, and if I can take one more minute, we also take sustainability very seriously. I have built Indian Green Building certified platinum grade home in Pune, which is entirely recycling everything from grey water to rainwater recycling to solar to growing our own vegetables and our fruits and all sorts of things. We live it every day. You will find me in handloom clothes all over the world, never trying to keep up with no matter who I meet. It's because we all need to do that. We all need to think about what we are wearing, what we are eating, where is it coming from? Did it come, avocados which come from Peru, how often do you eat them? These are all thoughts. Impact is a life choice. I don't think it's just a choice for investing. It goes way beyond that. And I'd just like to kind of bring that to the attention to the audience, that these are all choices we can all make, because a lot of us in this room have steady homes and the ability to pay our bills. So if there's something I'd like to leave for the room, it's please go back thinking about each of our choices and what we tell our families as sometimes leaders, sometimes elders. It's very, very important that we show the way.
Right, beautifully put, Leena. I'm told we're out of time, so thank you very much.
Thank you, Neil.
Thank you so much. I request you to please stay back on stage. Right, ladies and gentlemen, now we are about to start with the award ceremony. But before that, I request Jenny ma'am to please felicitate our panelists. Once again, thank you Mr. Borade and Ms. Dandekar for highlighting the profound and lasting impact family offices can have on society.